Okay, I've turned on the recorder too, so that way we can upload this to the YouTube. I also restarted stream, so don't be alarmed. Do not be alarmed. I wanted to play Once Human, but no new servers. Worms of Mass Destruction was fun, but I feel like it needs to be played with other people to make it the most fun. So instead, we're going to read a book. The only thing I don't have with me is my hot tea. Normally, I would have some hot tea when we read a book. Sad face. Very sad face. But that's okay. Oh, my neck needs a good quacking. All right. So, just to kind of help everyone get up to speed with where we're at here. Kingdom Society has had a lot of twists and turns in the story, but so far, we haven't beaten the bad guy. And I'm not sure we will, because this is book 1, meaning there will be others. We're also on the wrong screen. There we go. That's better. So I figure, yeah, I don't know if we're actually going to defeat the bad guy, at least officially. Now, the chapter that we read before this on Sunday alluded that there's a chance. One of the, I forget which guy it was, but suddenly has this ability where he could actually kind of wipe him out, essentially. Zalron could be defeated. But I guess we'll see. Or maybe he is defeated, and then that's what brings on a new bad guy in book 2. Perhaps. Oh, and by the way, excuse me, I have a lead for our next book. I met someone on Reddit that needs someone to narrate part of the book. And so I read a sample of it, and it sounds really interesting. And I let them know what I do on here, and I told her, I was like, look, even if you don't pick me as the person to record this portion that you need recorded, no big deal. I'm still really interested in the book, and I would love to read it on stream. So we're going to figure that out. I'm giving her time to select her book narrator first, which hopefully will be by the end of this week. So we'll see. But anyway, for the here and now, we're on chapter 33. It's called The Windy Bridge. So here we go. Alioth dropped to the ground and sprawled out. Only 2 hours of training, and I feel like I've been fighting in a war for 20 years. The old man is insane. As he stared at the deep blue sky, he started thinking about his sister, wondering if perhaps her training was as hard as his. He knew she was strong, and that was enough for him. You alive, Alioth? A weak and tired Ezra called out to him from a few feet over. Alioth turned his head over and stuck his tongue out. I'm exhausted, but still alive. I didn't think Zylok's training would be this intense. It's necessary, though. Our enemy is probably plotting his next move as we speak. Ezra raised his legs and kicked his torso upright. Getting to his feet, he offered a helping hand to his cousin. Eliath took it gratefully and pulled himself up. Xylock appeared before them and clapped approvingly. You both did well. I think it's time we go to Sam's for dinner and get some good rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Xylock turned around and aimed his hands at the stone pillars. With a snap of his fingers, a brilliant explosion of silver energy leaped forward and disintegrated the rocky platforms. Eliath followed his master and cousin toward the small town. Everything had grown quiet. Shop owners finished grabbing their merchandise and moved it inside their homes. Close signs appeared in the windows just as the sun tucked itself behind the blanketed red horizon. Seagulls, eagles, and other birds sang their songs as they fluttered across the sky. A strong aroma of salt blew in and Eliath squinted, trying to determine where it came from. It wasn't long before they arrived at a small red and black brick home sitting atop an elevated bit of ground. Long strands of yellow-green grass swayed, accompanied by violet, azure, and yellow flowers. This was Eliath's first time in Baytown, and it wasn't until arriving at Sam's front door that he realized the reason for the salty smell. Xylock, is that? The old wizard proudly pointed with an excited grin. Indeed, lad. That is the Silver Sea, the largest body of water in Dun Nahar. Of course, how could I have forgotten? The two famous bridges go across this sea. The hazy red sun reflected off the crystal clear sea. Waves no bigger than a half-foot slowly rolled into the rocky shores. Eliath stared a bit to the west and came across a colossal bridge. Turning to Xylock, he pointed excitedly. Are we going across the bridge tomorrow? The old man nodded. Yes, we are. For now, though, it's time we get some substance and good rest. Tomorrow will be the hardest part of our journey, and difficult training for the both of you. Eliath gave his cousin a fist bump, then followed the old man inside. Sorry, my music is being really weird. I think it's good now. The morning came quicker than Eliath would have cared for. Every part of his body ached from the previous day's training, and his stomach growled. It didn't matter that he'd eaten 3 plates worth of eggs, bacon, sausage, 2 bowls of grits, and a chunk of smoked cheese, and a piece of garlic sourdough bread. He was still hungry. That's a lot of food. He walked up to where the ground fell away and the sea lay below. Sitting, he let his legs dangle and stared into the sparkling waters. A few dolphins jumped up and released excited trills before crashing back down into the sea. Eliath looked deep into the horizon and found 10-foot-high waves, maybe higher, coming toward the shorelines. On top of that, the winds were much harsher than the day before. Looking over to the bridge, he followed it with his eyes as far as he could until it disappeared from sight. How long is that thing? Cousin, come on. Xylock says it's time to go. Eliath turned around and gave Ezra a cheerful wave. He got to his feet and followed the man toward the road. That bridge is insane. Ezra nodded. I saw the entrance to the bridge on my morning walk. It's more insane up close. Excitement built within Eliath. He'd learned about all the cities that bordered the Silver Sea when he was younger. Among the cities sat Baytown, Old Town, Mineral Springs, and the most famous being Silver City, the birthplace of Kai Torringson, the High Warlock of the land. One of these days, I'll visit every city and town in Dun Nahar. Then I'll become the next High Warlock of the land and protect everyone. As his thoughts left him, the sight of the holy magnificence stared him down. A large wooden sign suspended by rock pillars said, "Windy Bridge." Eliath steadied his breathing as he took it all in. Ships and boats of all calibers lined the docks. Captains, fishermen, and merchants walked down the rickety wooden walkways, making their way toward the main road. They pushed carts and wagons full of gold, silver, water, food, and other various items toward town, while some went onto the bridge toward a large group of onlookers. These Naharians showed excitement, as they'd been waiting for a shipment of goods for weeks, if not months. The bridge itself was built of a reddish-brown wood, common from trees in Dorthenim and West Valheta. Towering square rock pillars coming from beneath the water held up the platform. The entrance of the bridge overlooked the beachfront coming straight out from the land, while the trails and walkways elevated their way up from the sand to even ground. As Eliath looked out to the west, he noticed 3 more entrances to the bridge, each spread out by a couple 100 feet. It was crazy to him that a bridge could be so wide. And that wasn't even the part that befuddled him the most. It was the fact that he could see small houses and huts spread along the bridge. As they approached, Xylok, who was visiting with one of the locals, Eliath grabbed the old man's arm and shook it. "People live on the bridge?" Xylok waved goodbye to the Naharian local and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Good morning, lad. Yes, the entire bridge has small settlements. We'll be stopping in a few hours to begin your training." Eliath nodded, but remained silent. It was one of the few times he had nothing to say. He simply had too many thoughts racing through his mind. How do these people survive on a bridge? He noticed Ezra staring out at the radiant, sparkling water. The man had a small smile on his face. More! And seemed at peace. B12, hello. How are you? You missed it. We were playing Worms of Mass Destruction earlier, and then I decided to swap over and read a little bit of our book. More. You'll get more. Just you wait. What do you mean, no? And hi, Mitchell. Are you saying no because you missed Worms of Mass Destruction? It was fun. I beat one of the levels in one turn. I don't think I'll ever do that twice. It was, I had to get on the helicopter, and so I flew up and then started shooting as I went across, and apparently it was enough damage and explosions and everything else that I literally killed all the other worms in one go. I was pretty proud of myself, if I do say so. I'm sorry, Mitchell, I don't have a puzzle. I wasn't expecting to be reading, but I just kind of decided to, swap over. You helldivered it? I did. It was pretty awesome, actually. I should have clipped it. Oh well. But yeah, welcome in, both of you. It's good to see you. And don't worry, I haven't forgotten. We will be in Discord later. Stunt Papa and Stunt Mama won't be there. They have a thing tonight. Not sure what the thing is, but there's a thing, and it's happening. Sounds like an important thing. But yeah. Well, reading fun is another category. What a name. It sure is. Hey, Textual, welcome back. I decided after playing the Worm game that I was like, you know what? We are going to read. Because it was fun, but it wasn't as fun as it could be if playing with a friend or something. So it was kind of a sporadic decision to play that game, so I just kind of decided, you know what? We're going to read for a little while. All right. If anyone is interested, textual, this may be just for you because the other folks have seen the link already. But if you type !kingdom, you'll get a link to the author of the book that we are reading. And then you can see his works on display, basically. But otherwise, I will get back to the book. I should say, normally I have I normally have a puzzle on the screen as well, but I didn't plan ahead. I offer jigsaw puzzles while I'm reading to give people something to do, if they don't already have something to do, that is. All right, let's see, we're on page 347 at the bottom. The man had a small smile on his face and seemed at peace. Eliath nudged his cousin with his shoulder. Are you doing better? I am. Being on this journey has given me a lot of time to think and reflect. If it wasn't for both of you, I'd most likely be in a dark place right now, so thank you. Ezra bowed his head respectfully. Eliath turned to Zylok, who had a small frown. The old man's eyes were focused on the path ahead, but it was clear he had something on his mind. Hey, Zylok, are you okay? The old wizard grunted and turned his frown into a smile. Yes, of course. I was simply thinking about the good times I used to have with my brother Merlin on this bridge. All our travels we had together before he left my side for good. Eliath's heart thumped louder. It was rare for the old man to talk about his brother, and on top of that, the wizard had a small undertone of sadness to his voice that he seldom had. Gathering the courage, Eliath forced himself to ask a question he'd had on his mind for a while. Old man, you never talk about your brother. Why is that? Zylok sighed as he tilted his head back and looked upon the azure skies. Grabbing his mahogany pipe from his side bag, he placed a small bit of homemade weed into it and began puffing away. Long before your time, my brother and I were thick as thieves. We shared a lot of wonderful memories. We ate, drank, fought, and trained together for many years. Unfortunately, there came a time when a horrible event occurred from our past that set us on different paths. My brother went on his own journey in search of more power, while I simply wanted to learn one spell, the rebirth spell. I lost someone dear to me, and I wanted nothing more than to bring them back to the world of the living. My desperate measures led me down a dark path. When I eventually performed the rebirth spell, it nearly killed me. I didn't get the one I cared about back either, but I ended up with Corey, and he's been my rock for over 2,000 years. Eliath placed his hand on the old man's shoulder. I'm sorry you lost someone dear to you. Just know you won't ever lose me. Ezra grabbed the wizard's other shoulder and nodded. We will always love you, even though you drive us mad some days. Zylok bellowed with laughter. I love the both of you. Now, for the main part of the story. My brother and I both lived in Targus together after I created Corey. I was seeking a new life, and he wanted to be close to me. My brother never got along with Arion, who was king at that time, and he loved to push boundaries. He continuously practiced dark magic, performing spells of dangerous measure with no regard for anyone around him. He told me it was because his master told him he needed to do it in order to become more powerful. Well, there came a day when we were called to aid the kingdom of Koldovia in a conflict against the dark elf prince Soramai. They had a dragon and a legion of powerful warriors. I was in the same team as Merrick and Kairos. My brother was by himself. He had a powerful weapon he'd created called Star Staff. It harnessed starfire and could easily melt someone down to atoms. At the time, we were losing badly. We'd called out to the gods, and to our great surprise, Elder God Edoth appeared. As the tide of battle was falling in our favor, my brother needlessly set a group of 500 enemy soldiers on fire. And he laughed as they slowly burned. You see, Merlin liked to hurt people. I don't know when he became that way. Maybe it was when I was a child, and I just chose not to see it. Or perhaps he really was the good brother, and something changed along the way. Either way, Elder God Edoth put the enemy warriors out of their misery by disintegrating them with the breath of sun powers. After the battle, I told Merlin that if he wanted to remain a part of my life, and to stay in Targus, he'd have to change his ways and atone for his sins. Well, needless to say, he left, and never came back. I imagine he's out there somewhere in the universe, causing chaos and doing horrible things. It pains me to think about what would happen if I had to face him in battle. I don't know what I'd do. Eliath went into his thoughts after hearing the old man's story. I never imagined his early life would be so awful. To have a brother so evil, and for Xylock to be so kind and caring. It's amazing. I'm glad we got to have him on our side instead of Merlin. I wonder if I ever had a brother if things would have been like that. Sindril would never be evil. She's got too much of our mother in her. I wonder if she's ever thought about me turning dark. No, there's no way. For the better portion of the walk, Eliath remained silent. He didn't know what to say, which wasn't a normal thing, as he usually had a comeback, insult, or cheerful thing to speak about in any situation. But this time, he found it better to remain quiet. In fact, he remained so lost in thought that he didn't realize the winds had become twice as strong since they'd left shore. Eliath felt as though there was an invisible hand trying to pull him off the bridge. He grabbed Xylock's arm. I didn't realize the winds would be this powerful. Xylock winked. That's why it's called the Windy Bridge, lad. We've only got another 100 feet, and we'll be at our stopping point. Cupping his hands around his eyes, Eliath did his best to look ahead, and was finally able to see through the hazy mist. A group of tall palm trees rocked back and forth above 100 rock houses. Each sat apart by a few feet and stretched the entire width of the bridge. Eliath couldn't believe forestry existed here. Anywhere else on Dun Nahar would have made sense. This is amazing. I can't believe I never got to see this sooner. He ruffled his cousin's hair and smiled. Well, what do you think, Ezra? Pretty spectacular, huh? Hey, Beef. What's up, sir? How are you? I checked on the servers in Once Human a little while ago. No change. Shocker, I know. Just absolute shocker. But, yep, not much going on there. So, just have to wait and see, I guess. And by the way, if it does get to the point of, like, no novice servers at all, I will just choose a hard server and just see how it goes. I don't mind the challenge. So we'll have to see. Because I don't if I have a choice of either choosing a hard server and not losing my stuff, or being forced into some unknown server and then losing my stuff, I'm gonna choose the hard server. But yeah, I know they are, but we still have like 15 days, so we'll just have to see how it goes. I sure would hope that in, a 2-week time frame that they would pump out more servers. They have to. They have to. Ezra closed his gaping mouth and nodded. Indeed, my father had told me about the bridge growing up, but I never knew people lived on it. Zylok, how do people survive up here? Wouldn't it take a long time to get consistent food and water? Eliath asked, perplexed. Zylok motioned toward the center of the small colony. I'll show you everything. We're staying here for the night. First, however, we are going to work on training. Eliath followed his comrades through the gathering of trees into the heart of the colony. Everything someone would expect in a town was there. Fire pits, business shops, houses, a small inn, and something very odd that caught his eye. A large square lift sat off to the side of the main road. Eliath looked up, but there wasn't anywhere for the platform to go, and Zylok was heading directly toward it. He chased after the old man with a finger up in the air. Where exactly are you taking us? There's nowhere for the lift to go. It's probably just for show. Ezra peered over the side of the bridge and motioned to his cousin. It's a lift, all right, but it's currently sitting at the top instead of the bottom. Look down there. Eliath peered over the bridge and, to his surprise, found another identical lift 100 feet to the north. A few people stood in the wooden box with fishing poles hovering above the water. Smiling, he continued to peer further down the bridge, finding multiple wooden lifts above the sea. Well, now I know how they get food and water. Come on, lads. We need to start training now. We don't have time to waste. Zylok motioned them into the box. Are we even allowed to use the lift? Ezra asked. The wizard lowered his head and grunted. It's a bridge, young master, not a city. Anything on the bridge is open to anyone who crosses it. The people who live here chose that life, but they don't own the bridge. Eliath jumped up onto the structure next to his cousin and Zylok. As they descended beneath the bridge, powerful winds pushed them back and forth. Eliath gripped onto the side of the lift for dear life. For a moment he felt as though he might fall off and plummet into the crystal clear waters below. He gasped as a colossal whale passed beneath them. As he studied further, he swore he saw a person holding on to the top of the creature. But a few seconds later, the whale vanished along with the person. I must be losing my mind. About halfway down to the sea, the lift halted and Zylok held his hand out toward the open air. A bright beam of purple light leaped from his fingertips and morphed into a square platform. The wizard jumped out of the lift onto his new creation. Come on, it's time to learn how to use your weapons. Eliath studied the glowing purple energy. He knew barrier magic was strong and could hold enormous amounts of weight. Looking back at the sea, he took a gulp. One wrong move and he'd fall to his death. He noticed Ezra hopping onto the platform with no second thoughts, so he followed. No way I'm letting my cousin outdo me. If I want to be as strong as Zylok, or better yet, Kai, I need to charge forward with no fear. From now on, my emotions will fear me. As he stepped out onto the purple structure, he stomped his foot a couple of times to test its sturdiness and found it to be adequate. He joined his master and cousin in the middle. Xylock stepped a few paces away and sat cross-legged. If you both look at your devices, you will see a small rectangular meter. Alioth, yours is up top on the bottom side. Ezra, yours is on the front. Those meters should have a hue of energy if they are charged up. I designed these tools to function on their own without a constant source of magic, but the energy crystals that power your devices will eventually run out. When you see your power meter flicker in and out, you need to force your magic into them. It's just like when you send it into a sword or another weapon. Then you should see your meter read full again. Xylock's body exuded purple energy as he rose into the air. For now, though, your weapons should already be charged up from the magic I supplied them. Now, I want each of you to attack me. Ezra looked around the blank purple platform and threw his hands up questioningly. How am I supposed to use alchemy bracelets if there isn't anything for me to transmute? Xylock cocked his head to the side and raised an eyebrow. Really? There's nothing around. He pointed toward the water below. You have the entire sea, not to mention the moisture in the air. Ezra tilted his head. The moisture isn't a physical object. There isn't. Boy, don't tell me it isn't possible. I know you're capable of anything you put your mind to. Do you want to stand around here all day and argue? Or do you want to get stronger? Xylock crossed his arms. Very well. I'll give him my best. Ezra stretched out his arms and jumped up a few times. Come at me with everything you've got. Xylock put his hands behind his head and relaxed. The slightest hint of a cocky grin showed on the corner of his lips. Alioth lunged forward with no hesitation. Aiming his charged gauntlets up, he formed a chain and attempted to wrap it around the wizard's leg. His eyes opened wide as the old man simply held up a hand and blocked the strike. How did he do that? His hand didn't even touch the chain. This is going to be tricky. He looked at his cousin, who seemed to be struggling to transmute anything. As his brain started racing with thoughts, an idea came to him. He rushed over to his cousin and put a hand over his mouth. Listen close. I'm going to create objects and you can transmute them. Together we'll assault the old man with a team attack. Aiming in front of his cousin, he materialized a square rock. Ezra slammed his hand on the creation. Emerald energy flowed from his fingers into the object, and as he screamed, it turned into 100 iron arrowheads. Alioth nodded his approval. Since you're stronger than I am with magic, use your powers to send the objects you create flying. I'm going to assault him from the back while you hit him from the front. Got it, Ezra said, charging more energy around himself and attaching tiny tendrils to each of the arrowheads. Alioth materialized 5 more stone squares, then made his way to the right of the hovering wizard. He aimed his hands at Xylock, focusing intently. He created 4 jade energy orbs with his gauntlets. Thrusting his arms forward, he released his attack and sent them at the old man's head. They circled around the wizard at high velocity. At the same time, Ezra sent a volley of emerald hue arrowheads at Xylock. As the old man was dodging, Alioth focused on his magic power and phased. He landed directly behind the wizard. Without giving his master a chance to turn around, he created 2 metal link chains and latched them around Xylock. Taking a deep breath, he slammed his fist against the old man, sending him soaring to the ground. Eliath winced as he shook out his hand and dropped to the ground. I've got to figure out a way to make close combat strikes without hurting myself. He thought long and hard of a way to use his gauntlets to protect himself. He knew he could use a body barrier, but he hadn't practiced the spell since he was a child. Then it occurred to him. Wait, I could do what Luffy does with Heiki. I just need to figure out if it will work or not. Here goes nothing. Eliath noticed Xylock hadn't moved from his position on the floor, and he found it strange. Ezra continued barraging the wizard with energy arrowheads. Eliath refocused on his hands and arms. Fists clenched. He grunted and found it harder this time around to use his gauntlets. He wasn't sure if it was because of one of the type of materials he wanted to create, or if he simply had become tired. Either way, he wouldn't give up. A small grin crossed his face as a silvery armor traced with lines of jade covered his hands and crawled up his biceps. He swung his arm in a circle and revealed at low light the armor, or how light the armor felt. Now it's time to see if this works or not. Eliath rushed forward, leaped as high as he could, came down and slammed his fist into the chains around the old wizard. The barrier ground rocked. Eliath didn't realize how close to the edge he was. His body began falling backward, and quickly. Ezra leaped forward but wasn't fast enough to reach his cousin. Don't fear, Eliath reminded himself. In a split second, he created a rock square underneath himself. The impact was rough, but better than being dead. He scratched his head as he jumped onto the purple barrier. That was a close one. The booming voice of Xylock sounded off. That was a job well done. Both of you should feel proud. Eliath looked over to the pile of chains and saw two of his masters. One was tied up in chains on the floor, and the other stood tall before them. He laughed as he threw a soft punch at the wizard's chest. You went easy on us, didn't you? And you used a clone? That's so cool, but so unfair at the same time. Ezra pointed toward Eliath's armored limbs. I'm impressed with your armor, cousin. I would never have thought of that. I'm kind of jealous of your gauntlets now. Eliath put his hand on his cousin's shoulder. You should be proud. The way you transmuted those rocks into arrowheads was really cool. We just need a bit more practice. Xylock nodded and put his hands around their backs. And you'll get it. When we get to Tytalis, I'll have Belgazar help. That way, we'll have two teachers. For now, though, we'd better head back up top and get ready for dinner. As they made their way into the lift, Eliath felt a low, rumbling echo in his chest. At first, it was small, but a few seconds later, the wooden craft shook. Dust and sand showered Eliath, getting into his eyes and mouth. He spat out a few times, attempting to get rid of the taste. After wiping his eyes, he looked out as far as he could manage and noticed a billowing cloud of smoke wafting into the sky. Not long after, horrified screams ran out across the bridge. Pirates! We're being attacked! Everyone run! They'll kill us! Somebody help me! I've got 3 children. Eliath turned to Xylock and narrowed his eyes. We're going to help, right? The wizard grunted and put his hands on their shoulders. Indeed we are. Hold tight. A moment later, they stood amid the chaos. Countless people ran scared for their lives. Fire burned on the edge of the bridge where a large chunk had broken off. Eliath rushed up to a woman who lay on the ground with a large piece of iron protruding from her chest. Blood seeped from her lips, and she coughed repeatedly. He looked into her dark blue eyes and was somewhat reminded of Kayla. Putting his hands on her point of injury, he grabbed onto the sharp object and prepared to pull it out. "Ezra, toss me a healing apple." His cousin came to him quickly and handed him the fruit. "Do you think the injury is too severe to heal?" Eliath shook his head and put the apple up to the girl's mouth. "I need you to take a large bite and swallow." The woman groggily moved forward an inch and bit into the fruit. Eliath pulled the iron shard out of her in one quick motion and tossed it to the side. Blood began squirting out of her wound. Eliath placed his hand on it and turned to the old wizard. "Zylok, help us! The healing apple isn't working." The old man rushed over and removed a silver tin from his side bag. Opening it, he took out a small amount of charcoal-colored ointment and rubbed it over the woman's wound. She sat up, lifted her shirt, and opened her mouth in surprise. "How did you do that, sir? You stopped the bleeding. And on top of that, I feel like I'm completely healed." Zylok kneeled, placed a hand on her shoulder and swallowed her and showed her his ointment. "This is a special concoction of herbs I've collected over the years. I call it the Searer. It immediately heals any skin injury and stops you from bleeding out. My young master here gave you a healing apple, which heals you from the inside out. However, since your injury was so severe, it required both remedies." The woman got to her feet slowly. As the sunlight struck her hair, it shimmered with a hint of blue. She held out a hand to the old man and smiled. "My name is Brella. I'm from the Bone Coral Refuge. My mother, who's the head of our clan, sent me out here to fix the colony's water filtration system. I didn't expect pirates to attack." Another cannonball struck the side of the bridge. Eliath's legs vibrated from the impact, and his pulse raced. He wanted to put an end to their enemies. He grabbed Zylok's arm and shook him. "We need to take out that ship, old man. We can talk afterward." The wizard nodded. "My dear, if you'd be so pleased, be so kind as to give us a few minutes. We're going to take care of our pirate problem. Boys, follow me." Eliath darted after his cousin and the old man to the edge of the bridge. A large vessel had its cannons aimed at the bridge. A large sail with two crossing swords and a half-blood moon in the middle stood high above the ship. Eliath looked at the old man with questioning eyes. "How are we going to take care of this?" Zylok chuckled as he grabbed both their arms. "Hold tight and prepare for an immediate fight. This will be an excellent training exercise." "Is it really smart to throw us in this situation? We've barely started with our training," Ezra asked. Zylok clicked his teeth. "Not to worry, lad. You'll be fine. Trust the process." Eliath clenched his fists excitedly as he prepared for the fight. "Whatever happens, don't fear." He turned one last time to Burla and gave her a thumbs up before the old man phased them out of sight. This time, Eliath could see Zylok and Ezra next to him in the earth's swirling energy. He found himself mesmerized every time he phased. Now that he understood how it all worked, he couldn't wait until he could phase others with himself. A split second later, he stood on the pirate ship, surrounded by angry-looking men. He chuckled and greeted everyone with his famous sarcasm. "Hello, uglies." Zylok scoffed and shot him a sour look. You really are quite the degenerate. Pound sand, old bat. Elias slammed his fist into the open palm. Let's do this. Zylok stuck out his tongue playfully as he charged purple energy around himself. Pound sand, eh? I think I'd rather pound these pirates into the ground. Ezra rolled his eyes as he placed his hands on the deck to the ship. I'm ready whenever you two ladies are done having your moment. Zylok and Eliath both shot Ezra a scowl, but eventually laughed. One of the pirates came forth and pulled out a cutlass and aimed it at them. You nasty filth be coming aboard my ship, eh? It seems you be wanting to meet an early grave. He turned to the rest of his men and shouted, Get them acquainted with the waters, boys. Zylok chuckled and slammed his palms together. Purple energy shot off him in crackling lines. Large cracks formed on the deck and cascaded outward toward the front and the back of the vessel. As the wizard screamed, the sea started rising around them. Eliath couldn't believe his eyes. They were now sitting on the sea floor. The waters swirled around them in a perfect circle. He'd never witnessed something so amazing in his life. Eliath activated his gauntlets and turned to a group of pirates. Zylok kept his hands pressed together and shouted out to the boys. You've got 5 minutes. That's how long I can hold this. Put your training to use. Eliath looked at Ezra and gave him a nod. Focusing on his energy, he formed armor around his hands and arms once more and charged forward at his first enemy. The pirate swung his cutlass in a quick downward slash. Putting his hand up, Eliath caught the blade and shattered it with ease. It then drove his fist into the man's throat and heard a sickening crunch as the pirate fell over, dead. Did I break his windpipe that easily? It was hard to believe his armor was so strong, but he was glad it was. Ezra currently wasn't using his alchemy gauntlets, but instead had a group of pirates tied together with emerald energy whips. He used his athletic build to his ability and jumped from point to point, using a glowing energy sword to cut through opponent after opponent. He laughed as he caught sight of his cousin. Quit staring at me and fight. Eliath nodded, and immediately the theme song for Pirates of the Caribbean came into his mind. Smiling widely, he aimed his hand at the mast and shot forth a glowing jade chain. Once it latched onto the thick wooden object, he gripped his chain and pulled himself into the air and into a flying circle. In his other hand, he formed a long jade-colored energy sword and slashed at the pirates as he passed them. After taking down 5 enemies, he dropped to the deck and used his gauntlets to create 4 square stone pillars. He shouted over to his cousin, Use your alchemy. Ezra nodded and slammed his hands into the 2 pillars at once. Emerald energy seeped outward and the stones turned into hundreds of iron arrowheads. He then shot forth green power whips and attached them into his weapons before releasing them. With a loud scream, he slammed his hands on the deck of the ship. For a second, nothing happened, but soon a low rumbling sounded before the ship broke apart into pieces of sandy rocks. Eliath jumped down to the seabed and went after another of the pirates. The angry enemy hacked and slashed, but Eliath blocked him at every angle with his armored fists. But out of nowhere, he felt a gash open on his cheek. Warm blood oozed out and dripped down to his chin. He took his thumb and wiped a bit of the liquid off his face. He pointed at his foe with an irritated scowl. You're pretty decent with a blade. Time to see how you do against mine. As Eliath circled his opponent, he thought about the weapon he wanted to form. The old man said these gauntlets can make anything. I just have to be creative. I hope this works. With a smile on his face, he swiped his hand sideways in front of his body and formed a 6-foot-long energy blade. He grabbed the beastly weapon and pointed it at his enemy. How do you like my helicopter blade, asshole? The pirate stopped his forward movement. His face scrunched up and spat on the ground. What the hell are you talking about, boy? I don't know about no helicopter blade, but your sorcery won't help you beat me. I be known as Drab, the pirate captain of this here vessel, and I've never lost a fight. Now I'll show you the true might of a... Eliath swung his blade and cut off the man's head. He chuckled as he walked away. Well, that was easy. Xylock shouted down at them. Get up here, lads. We'll drown the rest. Eliath nodded and dissolved his energy blade. With no time to waste, he phased to the top of the sandy mound next to the old man and his cousin. Xylock nodded to both of them and grinned. You did well. You're starting to get better with your tools. Perhaps when we get to Tytalis, I'll have you duel with each other. Grab a hold of me, and don't let go. A few seconds later, Eliath stood back on the windy bridge. He peered out to where the pirate ship had once been. Nothing remained. The sea looked as though their fight had never occurred. Brella came over and placed a hand on Xylock's shoulder. Sir, you saved me and everyone here. I'm in your debt. Should you ever need assistance with anything at all, you come to the Bone Coral Refuge. My people will help you. She smiled kindly at them and bowed her head. Xylock blushed a bit and grunted. It was nothing, dear. I'm glad we could be of assistance. Didn't you say you were here to fix the water filtration system? Brella nodded curtly and pointed over toward the houses. Yes. Would you like to help? Xylock turned to Ezra and Eliath. Well, lads, what do you say we help this kind lass and then sit down for a feast afterward? We still have a small amount of daylight left. Tomorrow we'll leave early for Tytalis. Eliath shook his head and motioned toward the colony. Lead the way, old man. As he went after his cousin and master, he stared at his gauntlets. The indicator flickered and he frowned. It seems I used a lot of energy in that fight. I'm gonna have to get better at pacing myself. I can't always rely on these tools. I need to be ready by the time we fight Zalron. He nodded to himself and clenched his fists. And I will be ready. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, was chapter 33.